When we think about sales, I also think we tend to think about execution. How do I execute? How do I get the next appointment? How do I do things that'll make me successful? And certainly that requires all of us, present company included, to do what? Focus. Now, with that being said, what are some of the things that we can do to position ourselves to be focused? So, a lot of you obviously know me, and I have my own battles with sales. So while I'm delivering products and services, I'm not selling. So I really have to maximize my time. So the last thing I want to do is come off preaching or giving you some insight as if I do it flawlessly, because I have my own battles. And I'll give you kind of an insight to the rest of this lesson. And that is, when I think about sales, if you really asked me honestly, Tim, you have 100 follow-up calls from a webcast you delivered versus putting together a proposal where I could gain business, I guarantee you, if I was being honest with you, I'd rather do the proposal than make those 100 calls. So with that being said, what do we do? What are some of the things that we can do as professional salespeople? One, clear the deck. And I will tell you my own personal strategy, but I think when I think about the concept of clearing the deck, you should have your emails returned before 8 a.m. You should have your emails sent out and cleared out by the end of the day. Now that's just a rough analogy, not knowing exactly how you do things. And that's just a rough insight. And then prep the next day's calls. Queue up your list, get your CRM ready, get your calls ready. And I use a tool, which I'm going to introduce here in a little bit, but I do this, and it seems so simple, but how often do we not do this? Where we feel like that thing's hanging over our head. Yeah, I didn't get back to all my webcast calls. So we do a lot of thought leadership through webcasting, and then I have to do follow-up calls. And there are times when I leave, let's say out of 500 calls, I leave 100 calls undone. That kind of wears on you. And I think it's really healthy to clear the deck as much as you can. Now, if your position affords you to do that, do your emails before 8 a.m., have your emails done at the end of the day. We are in an email society the way we communicate. It's one of the reasons we all hate voicemail. Because people just say, I'll email them or I'll call them back. It's become this very passive communication tool. Now, I want you to think about a sense of urgency. I want you to think about a challenge. Whatever is germane to your job, I want you to think about a major success by 9 a.m. Assuming you start at 8, or if you start at 9, your success would be by 10 a.m. But I want you to create one success by 9 a.m. Here's why. Let's be honest, when we're making tons of phone calls and we're getting voicemail, we haven't cleared the deck, we've got some emails, we've got some people we've got to get back to, which is certainly going to happen during the course of the day. The fact of the matter is, if we don't have a success, we start to get into a mentality of chasing success. So it has always been my strategy to have one major success by 9 a.m. Now, I'll give you an example. I come into my office every day at 6 a.m. My emails are done. I get all my client work done. Any of the recordings I have to do, much like this one was done before 8 a.m., I tend to get those done by 8 a.m. because I know I'm going to get emails or people are going to download information off our website or whatever the case might be. But I have positioned myself. And if I demonstrate a sense of urgency, because let's be honest, customers' attention spans are very short today. So if your success is an appointment, awesome. Here's the other thing. I'm going to throw this out as a challenge. If you have 100 calls a day, let's just use that as a rough number. Try to get 40% of those calls done by 9 a.m. Now, some of you may have just thought, oh, Tim, you don't understand. There's no way. I'm not saying it's a foolproof percentage, but get 40% or a major percentage of your calls done that you have to make by 9 a.m. That sense of urgency will create momentum. Now, I think we've all talked about this, and we all know it to be true. Voicemail's just awful. When you're constantly leaving voicemails. When was the last time you heard a fellow salesperson say, I really left about 27 awesome, powerful voicemails. I'm expecting some return calls. What do we typically say? I had to leave voicemails. Because it's this afterthought. So what you're looking at to the right is a screenshot from a tool we use called Phone Burner. And I have 3 circles. So assuming this person answers the phone, the bottom circle would light up and it says leave voicemail. So assuming this person, does not answer, basically what I would do is push that button. A pre-programmed powerful voicemail message is automatically left. Guess what happens? The next number is dialed for me. So when you see at the top one of 151 contacts, I've loaded up a list of 151 contacts. I can get through this list in about 60 minutes. Now you see the middle circle, email to send. I can have pre-programmed emails that comes from my email URL, Tim at Progress Coaching Leader. So if I'm following up on a webcast on coaching attitudes or a webcast on building better teams, I can develop voicemails and emails that are germane to those follow-up calls. I have streamlined. And the reason I share this with you is not to promote the tool, but when I'm done with my calling and my prospecting and my follow-up calls germane to my sales execution, I am typically done by about 9 to 9:30 a.m. I've got the rest of the day. So whether it's this tool, another tool, or some process, try to have a goal of getting 30 to 40% of your calls done by 9 a.m. Not just to get them done, but to have one major success by 9 a.m. Number 3, this is probably the biggest battle, and it's why I started out with the introduction. The nebulous versus the tangible. Let's be honest, when we do 100 calls, it's nebulous. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't know if they're going to answer the phone. Quite frankly, studies bear out about 90% of the people are going to have voicemail. That's frustrating. Doesn't do a lot for your psyche. Then we have the tangible. I know I can send this proposal. An appointment is something that's tangible. What do we tend to gravitate to? The unknown or the known? We gravitate to the known. It's easier. It's controllable. It feels better. So what I want you to think about are time blocks. Give yourself permission to block out time for the nebulous and the tangibles. I typically do time blocks in 30 minutes or less. Typically, I do 2 20-minute time blocks an hour, and I leave myself a 20-minute time block of miscellaneous. Then I can search the web and go on LinkedIn, but I'm disciplined. I think I'm disciplined in doing this on a thoughtful basis. The other thing, turn off email. We are like Pavlov's dogs. When we see that email and, oh my gosh, it's important, I got to get back to them right away. Why? Because it's tangible. It's a lot more comfortable in those 100 calls where you know you're going to get voicemail. So block out time for the nebulous and block out time for the tangibles. My advice is to have a selling ratio of 8 to 1 during the hours of 9 to 5 if possible. 8 to 1. What am I talking about? Have a ratio of 8 to 1 in terms of selling activity versus administrative. I've got to craft this email. I got to get back to them. And it's a game we play in our heads, right? We almost convince ourselves those emails are more important than what they are. Well, I'll have to just do more calls tomorrow. And what happens is that becomes a fulfilling prophecy. So I want you to think about, how can I have a ratio during the hours of 9 to 5 where 8 to 1 I'm selling versus administrative tasks? Now this is going to seem weird. I literally craft out and schedule time blocks for Wow Time. I try to spend a half an hour a day, and I have 2 cards that we printed up with Vistaprint. One card is, I've got an idea for you. Second card is, you gotta love referrals. And what I try to do is send 1 card a day. We also have custom thank you cards. I try to send 1 card a day. And there are times when it's 4:30 and I've got to go do something. I'm thinking, I'll send the card tomorrow. And there are times I do that. I'll be upfront with you. But I do think if we can stay really consistent with this, it builds up the brand. So recently I sent a card. I've got an idea for you. Sent a referral to somebody. And this woman called me and she said, this is the first time anyone's ever done that in years with me. what has happened to the referral business? I said, well, I'm not so sure I do it as well as I should. And she said, this was awesome. And I said, I've got a company that I think would be of great value to you. I think you would be valuable to each other. Please use my name. Here's the contact name. I teed it up for her. She was wowed. Getting together, we're going to exchange some leads and referrals. It leads us to our last point. You are a brand. And I forget who said it. And it might have been Warren Buffett. But the brand, our personal brand, is not what people say to you. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And one of my favorite authors is Jeb Blunt. And he writes a great book. People buy you. And so when I think about that, it's not always what we sell, but it's how we sell it and who's selling it. That's the brand. That's your values. That's your mission. That's how people feel about you. So if you're typical, like most people are in sales, well, hi, Charlie, this is Tim. I just wanted to call and check in. If that's your voicemail, you've blended in. You haven't stood out. There's no differentiating factor there. So give some thought to, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room in terms of how you sell? And what actions are you going to take to facilitate that? I hope this has helped. Have a great day.